So I think one of the great privileges before we get started of this conference for me is that we've got such a great ecosystem of other vendors who are supporting this. We've had an amazing set of technical talks this morning, and then I think the enterprises that are participating, we're really privileged to have the leadership of the platform as a service sections of BNY here today, as well as the infrastructure engineering, these senior leaders on stage to share with our community. I think that's really special. So starting off with David, a question for you. Maybe tell the room a little bit about the history of platform as a service at the enterprise that is Bank of New York and your involvement in it and where it's been.
Yeah, so we're actually on our third generation of platform as a service technology. We started out with utility computing in the mid-90s. You know, some of the stuff that talked about in video, we actually developed the first online brokerage systems using utility computing models, you know, believe it or not, offered on CompuServe, Prodigy, and AOL. And then when the internet came out, we transitioned that to DLJ Direct and CSB Direct. We've heard some of those brands. That technology was all utility computing. Developers weren't provisioning machines, they weren't building out infrastructure, they were deploying applications to a stack and building reusable services. And around 2001, we transitioned that to a Java-based PaaS, and we've been building that for the last 10 years. We built a lot of great DevOps capabilities into that, and you know, about 2 years ago, we decided to convert that to open source, so we selected our own stack for PaaS and build out a PaaS infrastructure. And you know, Swamy has helped out with the infrastructure side of that, so he'll be talking about his part of that mission. But I think, you know, we collectively delivered that platform into production in the middle of last year. We got
that platform is called BXP.
Yeah, that's called BXP. We've got about 100 apps running on it, maybe 10, 15,000 users a day, several million transaction requests, and you know, we're aggressively migrating all of our Java workloads to that platform. So you know, we started talking with Pivotal a couple months ago, and you know, liked what we saw about Cloud Foundry, so we just joined the foundation, and we're looking forward to digging in and figuring out how it applies into our strategy.
Yeah, I mean, so for folks that may have not have already heard, hopefully you have, Bank of New York is a gold member of the coming Cloud Foundry Foundation. I think it's hypercritical that we have enterprises also at the table with their requirements. Cloud Foundry is an enterprise-focused platform as a service. Swamy, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you met Pivotal, kind of how we came in, Cornelia Davis, just a little bit of the history of how we first met, and you know, your thoughts on the transition to working with us a little bit and how that went.
Right. Yeah, thank you, James. First of all, thanks for having us. You know, yesterday I heard a talk which basically said that infrastructure or OpenStack and Cloud Foundry is marriage made in heaven. and I was thinking about it this morning. In fact, you know, the Dave Lewis platform as a service and the infrastructure engineering is kind of like the marriage made in heaven for BNY Mellon when we started this journey 3 years ago. But I'm sure both of us have better looking spouses. So we started this journey about 3 years ago where we built this platform as a service. You know, yesterday we talked a lot about how it's all about developers. When we started this journey, we basically said that it's not necessarily about developers, but it's also about operations staff and about the risk, right? When we did the business case for cloud, we basically said that giving developers a machine is not good enough, because the reason why we wanted to do the cloud is as much as we like the developers, we don't want the developers to call us or depend on us. So we, from get-go, build platform as a service so that it's kind of one stack up and down. So much like we go to the doctors every year for physicals, we basically do an external company come in and check our implementation to make sure that we have covered all the bases. So when we saw the buzz around Cloud Foundry, we basically thought, Pivotal would be the right company to kind of give an assessment of where we're doing. That's when Cornelia Davis came in and did an assessment, and that's when we basically said that, okay, we know what we're doing, and we know the roadmap of what Cloud Foundry is, and then we wanted to kind of be a gold member and be part of the foundation.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've been inspired by working with the Bank of New York leadership is that a lot of the things we think about from a platform as a service perspective, they'd already thought about. So David and I had, I think, a great whiteboard session one morning in New York, and it was sort of like an immediate mind meld because they were thinking about the same platform concerns already. So it wasn't like we had to go in and convince them about why PaaS. And I think that's what's made this so great. And maybe, Dave, you want to share some of the the reasons why PaaS and the challenges that you solved with BXP and kind of what you'd already accomplished when we got there, if you want to detail a little bit about that.
So one of the things that BNY Mellon is in the process of doing is we've got a strategy called our digitization strategy, where we're really transforming our whole organization. And I think, what Swamy mentioned about the developers, and, when we're looking at, it used to be financial services drove the technology agenda. We were putting all the money into technology, all the vendors. We're funding a lot of the innovation in technology. Now it's consumer businesses that are driving the technology agenda. And, we've really made a very conscious and deliberate decision to adopt that mission, convert strongly to open source, and, establish an ecosystem that allows us to provide consumer-grade client experience and deliver our world-class financial services in a really comprehensive way to an even larger audience. So PaaS is a critical component of that because, for all the reasons that we've heard a lot in the last couple of days. But, I think the thing that we were able to leverage is, we've been doing this for about 10 years. We've done a lot of, we've discovered a lot of things about how you can and can't run large infrastructure. We've got about 2,000 JVMs running in our
so you already have,
PaaS.
People have been talking about 100, 200. You have 2,000 already running in your platforms as
That's
service.
in our second generation PaaS. We just crossed the 5,000 VM boundary on our production cloud in our new third generation environment. So we've actually got, across the organization, probably 3,500 JVMs running in our production PaaS, second and third generation, and collaborating. We're sharing services between the two. So, we've got, we have a very small team. We believe a team of maybe 10 people running the second generation PaaS for 2,000 VMs. So that's a real testament to a lot of the DevOps capabilities we built into that infrastructure. And I think, when we're looking at Cloud Foundry and had the conversation with you, I think that's really where we're seeing a lot of things we like in the stack and also things we can bring to the table and be a real contributor to the environment.
Yeah, I think that's really important. This is not a just a transaction between the two of us where somehow they say, hey, whatever you've got. And Swamy, you've talked about how open source is important in both the infrastructure layer and the platform layer. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you think about open in your cloud services.
Right. I mean, like I said, as much as we like the developers and operations staff, we had to generate the business case for what we need to do. So from the get-go, our platform as a service is built with the OpenStack components, but some portions of the technology was not mature at that time. So we have a third-party, cloud broker that we have, and over time, we'll be replacing that with the OpenStack components.
Got it. So OpenStack is also a big bet for the BNY Cloud Services team.
Right. Right. The one thing I want to mention is nobody should do cloud for the cloud stake. You have to think about what is the business case for the cloud and where is the bottom line, what is the impact to the bottom line for your organization. So what we noticed is, everybody has been virtualizing for quite some time, but virtualization is almost like taking your physical machine and doing what I call as space division multiplexing. You're cutting that into multiple slices. With cloud, we're able to do time division multiplexing. As the workload comes in, we could elastically expand. And now with Cloud Foundry and some of the innovation that we're seeing with Docker, we can actually squeeze a lot more in the infrastructure so that we can get a lot more efficiencies from the data center, and hence reducing the costs and improving the efficiency.
So maybe you want to touch on a little bit, like what you see in Cloud Foundry today. What are some of the early wins that maybe you think we can collaborate on as a community, and kind of the early promise of Cloud Foundry to BNY?
Yeah, definitely. The primary reason why we are part of the Cloud Foundry is, like many people mentioned, enterprises don't like the vendor lock-in. We want to kind of make sure that Pivotal and Cloud Foundry is honest in kind of making sure that whatever Cloud Foundry does is enterprise friendly. That was really our main driver. And we hope to participate in the governance of it as much as the Foundry allows us to do, and also drive the standards and the openness for Cloud Foundry.
Absolutely. David, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I think one of the things that we're working on is really driving automation and integration with the full stack of infrastructure into our PaaS. And I think one of the things that we're looking at, one of the things that we like about Cloud Foundry is the BOSH abstraction layer and the ability to give us a starting point where we can start to pick and choose the things we want to do with Cloud Foundry. I think one of the things actually that I think is really exciting about Cloud Foundry, as we just saw the Diego presentation, I think, given the scale that we operate on our environment, I think operating at that scale, there's a lot of challenges keeping stuff running, and I think some of the stuff that he pointed out in the presentation is the same kind of things. Like, why isn't that running? And I think having a really solid strategy and design around that kind of stuff, I think that really goes a step beyond what I think we've been able to accomplish, and that's a pretty exciting development of something that we would want to pick out of the Cloud Foundry.
So basically, one of the things that we have in our current platform as a service is a notion of a partition. So what we're talking to the Foundry members is, how do we take some of the code that we have developed, and what does it take for an enterprise? And we never contributed to open source. We want to kind of see what does it take to kind of contribute to open source and take that partition some of our architects have developed and see how we can add to the foundation as well.
Yeah, I mean, just sitting here, it's a pretty interesting moment in history, right? We've got David, the leader of platform at a big enterprise like BNY, talking about an algorithm distributing application workload across hundreds or thousands of virtual machines autonomously. It's a very big departure from kind of some of the older world of like very VM-centric, stamp out, et cetera. And it's kind of nice to know the Unseen team are there thinking about that distributed algorithm for you potentially. So I think that's an interesting moment in kind of open source in the enterprise. It's just maybe worth noting. Maybe you want to talk a little bit else about, BNY is very dedicated to innovation. You've been leading this platform as a service for years. You're also opening up a Silicon Valley office. How is that important to how, enterprises are innovating today with kind of the modern software development ethos, Agile, some of these trends?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of aspects to that. One is, I think we as an organization, when we look at our next generation PaaS platform, it's not just the technology, it's the whole organization. We want to transform the way developers work.
Right.
We're changing the way we configure the floor space in our offices. I mean, it's really...
So you like the pivotal labs kind of flat layout, everyone can collaborate rapidly.
Yeah, we've got labs already in our India offices, and we're building out in our US offices as well, those spaces. And I think, my mission when we talk about our platform is converting the way developers work, the tools they use, the way we integrate with our infrastructure, with our heritage services. It's a complete transformation of how we're building software. And I think the other thing is, I think getting that mindset change so that we can be more agile to assemble capabilities for clients, because it's really, at the end of the day, in addition to some of the cost savings, it's really transforming how we deliver business to our clients. And that's really our mission, is to give world-class consumer-grade experience to our clients using latest technologies. And I think what the lab is going to allow us to do, given the focus of with consumer IT driving the technology agenda and the innovation, and really our emphasis on leveraging open source technology, it's critical for us to have a presence where that stuff is built, be where the sausage is made, and get a deep collaboration going with the local ecosystem. So I think, both influencing our culture as well as helping accelerate our strategy and our agenda, that's really what we're looking for.
And I've seen this as across the enterprises I speak with, every day, is that they're looking at agility transformation, staffing transformations, and platform transformations, kind of as all one big net new platform that they're solving for. How does that affect you on the infrastructure side and operations? And is operations undergoing a regenesis of how they think about their jobs today?
That's a good question. Agility has been there. Agile programming has been there for quite some time. I'd say Agile programming is not new. But what we are seeing is, in the past, these Agile development methodologies are running on the traditional waterfall infrastructure pieces. So right now, with the cloud and infrastructure as a service and automation, you can actually have the developers have agile development approach and have the underlying infrastructure also built in an agile manner. Right. So that's to us is the biggest shift so that we can actually show our agility on the application side, on the infrastructure side, and give better value to the businesses that we serve so that we can innovate better, we could respond to our client services requests better.
Yeah, so this definitely affects both platform and operations in, I think, a pretty profound way.
Right.
Yep. Right. You know, maybe, you know, we've got a couple minutes left. What are the things that you think are hard about enterprise PaaS that the community needs to get right to make this work in an enterprise context?
Yeah, I think for us, you know, the biggest struggle is, you know, when you look in, you know, and I think it's across the entire organization, it's a completely different way of thinking about software, and that includes, you know, the big one for us is information security.
Yep.
You know, as you can imagine, with $27 trillion under management, we need to think about that a little bit.
A fifth of the world's assets, as the video said.
Exactly right. So you know, we're fairly obsessive about that stuff, and I think the way that we managed it in the past, you know, it's a lot of 1990s technology in some ways. You know, DMZs and firewalls and, you know, a lot of the infrastructure around that, you know, and at all levels of the infrastructure. So even once you put your PaaS out there, getting it so you can get it in front of clients, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And I think, you know, Swamy and I have been working on ways to automate all the infrastructure in a way that's not only way more secure than I think infrastructure has been in the past, but also is a lot more flexible and agreeable when it comes to talking to compliance and information security and all the other folks that need to be engaged.
That's a fascinating angle for me, because when I look at Cisco this morning opening up with their new Cloud Foundry integrated into their rules engine for network deployment and automation, I know that's one of the areas where the boundary between the platform as a service and the network has been a focus for you.
Yeah, because you can't just make it easier, you know, because if you make it easier for us and you make it easier for the bad guys, it's got to be better.
Yeah.
So, and it's also got to be automated. And, you know, we just haven't seen anything yet that really solves that part of the equation. A lot of the PaaS stuff, you know, it's like when, you know, we even had that discussion when we first talked about Cloud Foundry. It's like, we already have all that.
Sure.
What do you got that we don't have? And I think, you know, I think that's where, you know, particularly when you see some of these other things coming out.
Yeah, I think that new concept of, hey, my application is surrounded by, as you deploy an application, everything around it changes.
Yep.
So some of the policy around it changes, the network configurations around it change.
Yep.
So that really the system is responsive to both the compliance needs as well as the agility needs at once.
Yeah, and it's got to work that way, because, you know, you can't have elasticity. If
Without
you're going to have
compliance.
elasticity, you have to be able to have the compliance and security too, and you just can't do it the old way.
So what can we do as a community to make Cloud Foundry and OpenStack great for you, Swamy? How would you think about where we should go with that together?
You know, I think we've been watching this platform as a service and OpenStack for quite some time. We've been looking at the journey of some of the other platform as a service like Engineered and other offerings. So what we thought is very important for us is we can't write the code, BNY Mellon can't write the code for all the applications that we need to serve our business. So we were looking for which one of the platform as a service offerings would have the ability to get the other application that others write available so that we can just pop that in our environment. So the biggest thing that we look for and the biggest barrier or success would be the ecosystem that you have, and would like the software that IBM has to be available as the build packs that we could just pop that in our environment and it's available.
Yeah, so this is the first time that really platforms as services come from just hosted only, which was a non-starter for you.
Right.
So as I mentioned in my quick talk the other morning, like, hey, you can have this in your data center on demand immediately. That's a big watershed event for an enterprise platform.
Yep.
Absolutely. You know, our strategy has always been, let's do what we need to do from a private cloud perspective, from a cloud perspective on premises, and build it in such a way that you have the ability to go out as opposed to build outside and something happens, you cannot bring that back in.
Right.
So we're building and architecting everything in such a way that we can always turn the knob and go outside to a public cloud.
Yeah, so you know that you can deploy it on OpenStack today and maybe a public cloud in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the other things which I think is worth mentioning, and I know we talked about some of this as well, is we got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
you know, and there's some pretty great stuff that we have that's never going to be on the cloud. We got a lot of mainframe-based services that are core technology capabilities. It's frankly pretty great stuff, and it needs to be a first-class citizen in our cloud-based ecosystem. And so we spent a lot of time on our V2 architecture getting all that well integrated across multiple data centers and working pretty darn well. It needs to work, you know, it needs to be a first-class citizen when you're operating with a cloud. There's a layer, and you got some cloud-based components, and you got some of these non-cloud infrastructure components. Having that stuff integrated, and we talked about some ways to do that with Cloud Foundry, that's a pretty critical piece as well, and I don't think it's fully solved.
Yeah, I think those are two highlights I've learned from dealing with the Bank of New York folks, is that legacy integration, of course, we've known about that for a long time, but making that a first-class citizen and how easily that plugs in. We have user-provided services today. We're going to do much more, as well as compliance automation as part of the workflow.
Yep.
I think those are two things we just got to knock out to take Cloud Foundry deep into the enterprise at a storied company like Bank of New York. So, hey, we're out of time, and this conversation is going to continue for years to come, hopefully, in a great collaboration between these two groups and Cloud Foundry. And thanks very much for coming up today.
Yep.
Sure.
Thanks, James.
I know we got about 6 people. If you could stand up, the BNY Mellon guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the architecture team for BNY. Do you want to stand up a little bit? They're all here in the front row.
Guys, no, we got a large
engineers
contingent
from
here.
BNY. If you guys want
Thank
to
you
meet
all.
them. Thank you.